right, welcome everyone. So I'd like to welcome you to this panel entitled Open Text, Discerning Minds, Broadening Critical Engagement with Digital Humanities. I'd like to thank AMICAL, represented by Jeff and Alex, and of course the reviewers of this panel for having us. I'm very pleased. And I'd also like to thank and introduce our speakers today. We have, to my left, Amani Shimi, who's Senior Instructor of Rhetoric and Composition and also the Director of the Office of Undergraduate Research at the American University in Cairo. She's a devoted supporter of undergraduate student scholarship, which I know well because she was the mastermind behind the Undergraduate Research Journal and many other efforts. And she's also interested in engaging pedagogies, community-based learning, digital liberal arts, and a variety of other things. She'll be co-presenting with Wafia Hamouda, also to my left, who's a lecturer at Translation Studies, who's presented at numerous prestigious conferences, and she received her PhD from Newcastle University in computational linguistics, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so she's the tech person on this panel, if you have any questions. To my right, we've got Kristen Hyland, who's at the English department at the American University of Sharjah. She's been teaching there since 2017, and she teaches introductory courses in literature and academic writing and advanced courses in American literature. She's also a digital humanist who's working to introduce digital skills and projects into the literature and writing curriculum and to build capacity and community with digital humanities at AUS. And we have Abdelaziz Galal, who's the digital humanities librarian here at AUC, who has a background in librarianship, who's got a degree from University College London, Qatar campus, and who, of course, is our resident digital humanities person. I'll leave the speakers to introduce their own interest in digital humanities. Let me just give a real quick overview of what it is we're talking about. And I'll start off with a definition of what digital humanities is and why you should bother. Someone who's cleverer than me has defined digital humanities as humanities scholarship that builds centrally on computational methods to do work which could not be done in any other way. So if we let this think for a moment, I can give you an example of a project that was done by a very clever person called Joshua Catalan, who analyzed the language of Indian treaties and who used computational methods to compare these texts, and there are hundreds of them, to find similarities and to plot them in space and time. And that kind of work with a huge body of text is work that couldn't be done with traditional methods. It needs digital tools to do that kind of analysis. And that leads us to the next point, critique, which this panel is all about. That the source material in humanities in general is, of course, in digital form, increasingly these days. So what sets digital humanities apart, perhaps, is its focus on the underpinnings of this process of using digital methods by focusing on the tools that are used and the way in which they're used. So digital humanities really requires an understanding of how digital content may or may not be suitable to answer a given research question. We can think of the example of a collection of digital texts that may be curated somewhere. A digital humanities project might typically look and has to look into why that collection exists as such, whether it was put together because of the theme, because it pandered to the interests of a particular researcher. Perhaps it was only put together because copyright restrictions allowed only that set to be created. Perhaps there were linguistic barriers that shaped this particular set of contexts. So these kind of inherent biases in the digital content are the meat of much of digital humanities projects, to analyze them, to understand them, and to critique them. And that's exactly what we'll be talking about today. So I've been talking enough. I'll hand over next to my colleague Abdelaziz Galal, who will be talking about various projects to showcase them. Just as a point of order, we'll have questions at the end after all the presentations, but because we started late, it'll be a little bit shorter. So thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mark, for the introduction. And I just have to make a remark saying that this talk was supposed to be given by Najla Jarkas, and unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it, so this is a last-minute call. So we made up this presentation for you. I hope it's going to be useful. Okay, we'll start. We're talking about text analysis in the classroom. So it's good to start to say, this is a line from Umberto Eco, I mean, the famous Italian novelist, who's saying that every text, after all, is a lazy machine asking the reader to do some of its work. So this is inviting us to work on the text. I mean, it says that we should engage with the text, whether with distant reading or close reading or distant reading. I mean, so this can all bring new analysis, a new understanding of any text. Okay, so we'll start with a few terminology. There's data mining. So the term data mining refers to any process of analysis performed on a data set to extract information from it. So this definition, of course, is very general. It could mean something as simple as doing a string search, typing into a search box, or in a library catalog, or in Google. Usually, the data mining in the digital humanities, when you talk about it, it means performing some kind of extraction of information from a body of texts or their metadata in order to ask research questions that may or may not be quantitative. So again, we're not doing, I mean, this research for the sake of research. It's for the sake of bringing new analysis and not just for the sake of using computational tools. We want to bring a new understanding, a new analysis, and that's the end goal of digital humanities. Okay, now we come to distant reading. The saying says that ars longa, vita brevis, which says that art is long and life is short. So no matter how long we live, let's say, I don't know, like 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, let's say you're a specialist in the Victorian literature, how many novels can you read? 100, 200, 300, at the end of the day, it's limited. So Franco Moretti, which is an Italian scholar, came up with this idea of, okay, I've got a solution. Don't read them. Just let the machine read them, which is distant reading. So of course, he wasn't saying don't read them per se, but I mean, he says that I've got another tool that can help us to extract another important information and details out of the text. Okay. So distant reading is the idea of processing a large number of textual items without engaging in the reading of the actual text. The reading is a form of data mining that allows information in the text or about the text to be processed and analyzed. The result is groundbreaking because we found out untapped trends and opinion which have unbelievable implications in research of humanists. His name is Toma Tasovac, who's in charge of the Daria Teach. And he was saying that he thinks that digital humanities, in his most cynical ideas, can be the revenge of global capitalism against humanities. Because when you hear that you're going to run Shakespeare through like text encoding and the machines and, you know, he must be turning in his grave. I mean, this is not humanities. I mean, what is this? But of course, I mean, there is an end goal to it. I mean, it's not just, again, as we said, it's not using the computers for the sake of the computers. We're doing this for the sake of the humanities and the research. Okay, so what did Franco Moretti come up with? I mean, this is an example of what he came up with through the distant reading approach that he was calling for. He, for example, he realized through analyzing the British literature and British novels from 1740 to 1840 that they follow waves, and that the genres, the different literary genres, they follow waves and they come in patterns. So you can see that, for example, the epistolary genre, I mean, it starts and then it reaches a certain summit and then people lose interest in it, like, for example, at around 1800. Then comes another genre, which is the Gothic genre. I mean, and it starts, let's say, at 1780, and then it reaches a certain summit, and then again, people start losing interest in it. I mean, you don't find much literature production into this genre. So this is one of the things he was able to find through the distant reading approach that he was calling for. Another thing, for example, he's mapping the novels that take place in Paris. So what he came out with is that, of course, this is I'm sorry, I cannot point out, but the river, I mean the Seine, which is in the middle, and to the bottom you can see, which is the rive gauche, which is the left bank, and on the top it's the right bank, rive droite. So he found out that the protagonists, most of them, they live in the left bank, while the objects of their desire, the ladies that they admire or love, they all live in the right bank. So what does this tell us? I mean, again, it's raising a question for further analysis. You can discuss that and develop it more. Okay, now we move to text analysis. Text analysis, it's a subset of data mining, and it is defined as the process or practice of examining usually large collections of written resources in order to generate new information, typically using specialized computer software. Text analysis programs use usually word counts, keyword density, frequency, and other methods to extract meaningful information. Okay, so this doesn't come in a single step. It's a process you have to go through. So the first thing is you have to gather the information, then you have to pre-process the information. What does that mean? I mean, you've got your text, you have digitized it. Well, usually it's not going to be clean, so you'll have to clean the text. This has to do with using OCR, which is going to give you sometimes not perfect results, but then you'll have also to clean the results of OCR, which is the optical character recognition. Then you will have to start indexing the results. Then comes the mining, which is you're going to use the technical tools and the equations and the text encoding to reach the final result, which is the analysis. Okay, so what can we actually do with quantitative methods? What are they good for? Well, we can categorize documents, contrast the vocabulary of different corpora, trace the history of particular features, words or phrases over time, like this word or this phrase was used more during this period and then it just vanished, that tend to be associated in a given corpus or document, also known as topic modeling. There's also entity extraction. If you're looking for a certain entity, how much was it mentioned, when was it first mentioned, and of course there's at the end the visualization. You can also. Okay, so how difficult is it to get started with all this? Well, we have usually two problems: to get the data and then to get the digital skills you need to process this data. So data is not easily to find. I mean, of course, more and more we have digital data now available, but still it's not enough. I mean, we need more. You need like something like the Gutenberg project. You need sources that can provide you with large corpuses and large amounts of data, which is not something very easy. Then the other thing, of course, is the digital skills that we don't all have. I mean, I'm not coming from a technical background. I'm not a computer specialist, so it's not easy to learn these skills. It's not impossible. It's not very difficult, but it takes some time. Okay, so let's move now to our main focus, which is text analysis in the classroom. So how does it look like, and how can we use it? So why use digital texts? Because it can be helpful for your course readings. Instead of textbooks, I mean the print textbooks, for provocation, for discussing mediation, for student presentations, you can use it as a tool for that, and you can use it as well for assignments. So, okay, so what possible activities can we do in the classroom using text analysis? And here we are ordering them like from the most basic to the most elaborate. So for example, creating word clouds. Of course, these they differ. Some can take like a few minutes and you can do it like in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Others might require probably the whole semester to work on it. So creating word clouds, that's a very short exercise. It might take 10 minutes, 15 minutes maximum, and that's it. There's the n-gram analysis, most frequent word analysis, variant analysis, and then text encoding. Okay, so we'll take one by one. Word cloud. The word cloud, all it does is that you enter a body of text in a program like, let's say, Wordle, which is one of the most used programs to create word clouds. Or you can paste the URL, whatever you have, and then you just say, go. Okay, when you say go or okay, I mean, it gives you this image that represents, I mean, the frequency of the use of different words that were present in this text according to how frequent they were and things like that. So that it doesn't really take much time, but it's good to have the students work on something like that. It's visual and it's easy and it's accessible. Okay, the second thing is the n-gram analysis. So this, for example, you can use it. It's the Google n-gram viewer, which depends on the Google books, which are digitized by Google, and you can put whatever you want from words. So, for example, here we used flute, guitar, trumpet, and drum, and then he can show you, I mean, how frequent and the pattern of the use of these words. Let's say from 1760 to 2000, how you see how it goes up and goes down, and when it was more frequently used and when it was less used and why. Of course, you can develop this more and go deeper into analysis and see why these patterns happen and why it was used more at a certain time and then less at a certain other time. Okay, there is another tool which we can use for the most frequent word analysis, which is Voyant or Voyant. And it gives you also a range of results. So again, number one, it gives you, for example, the word cloud. And in two, it gives you the reader, which shows you again the frequency of a word in the text. And then there is here the trend, which gives you, for example, the frequency again of the words in a certain text, and where did it show more than the other. Like, for example, towards the middle of the novel, for example, the word reached the maximum number of times it was used, and then it went down. In here, 4 and 5, it shows the most common used words and in what context they came, like in what phrases they came, what were the words before and after. So it gives you a general view of the most common words and how they appeared. I mean, what was before them and what was next after them. Okay. There's another thing, which is the variant analysis, and this is a tool which is called Juxta. Here you can put, like, for example, in this example, you have 2 editions of the Frankenstein novel, of course, for different editions and different years. One is for the 1818, and the other one is for the 1831. And it traces, the differences in the 2 editions. It shows you what has changed between the 2 editions. Okay, then we move to the last thing, which is text encoding. That's a little bit the most complicated one. So this is an example from the Walt Whitman archive. That's a site you can visit. You'll find a lot of documents from Walt Whitman. So some of them are in his own hand writing. Okay, so you have this document and you want to text encode it. So what's the problem? That's the text, and this is what you would like to have. But the problem is that to reach this, you have to go through this, which is text encoding. And actually, it should not look like this. It should look more something like this. So why do we have to go through this? Well, because the computer is not as clever as we think it is. The problem is that the computer does recognize this as an image, not as a text. So when you digitize it, the computer cannot search the text and the lines within it. He just sees this as a text. So we have to transcribe it and encode it to make him understand that, oh no, this is not an image. Be careful, this is text. Again, okay, I can transcribe that, I can hear, and it will be searchable. But the problem will be that, for example, let's say there is here written Cairo. I'm going to tell him, yeah, please search for the word Cairo, how many times it appears in this text. And yes, he can search for that, but the problem is that if I tell him I'm looking for the name of a city, or I'm looking for a geographic place, he will not understand that. He doesn't know that Cairo is a geographic name, is a place, is a city. So I have to tell him everything. I have to tell him that, be careful, Cairo is a geographic place, it's a city. And for example, that Walt Whitman, that's the name of a person. So that's the problem with the computer. The computer doesn't recognize that automatically. So how do we do that? We do it by text encoding, that's it. That's the back end that you don't see of any site. If you go at any site and see the source of the site, that's usually the back end, the part that you don't see. You have to encode. And it follows this pattern, which is like a hierarchy that has to go. Okay, so these are some of the examples of people that have used text analysis in the classroom, and these were the topics that were of interest to their students, for example, that they came up with. So one of them, for example, wanted to analyze the civil rights speeches now, in the future, the past, and the other. So he wanted to analyze 20 speeches by civil rights and women's rights activists, measuring how different speakers use certain words that indicate a focus on oneself, like using I and me, and on others, using they and them, and then a focus on the past, like had, was, were, and then a focus on the future, will, should, would, could. Now, another interesting example, the evolution of Donald Trump's Wikipedia page. So the student assessed the full text of Donald Trump's Wikipedia page on specific days in its edit history. So the day before Trump announced his candidacy, how did it look like? What were the edits that happened afterwards? The day before winning the Republican primary, how did it look like? And then afterwards, how did it look like? What did change? And analyze in the lyrics of every album released by the Beatles, seeking to understand what subject matter has changed in their lyrics, what subject matter persisted, continued to show up, and how each album was distinct from the other. Okay, so now we just have a time. Okay, so we have a very, close look to text encoding. I don't want to go beyond time. Okay, so text encoding, as we said, it's a markup language among the most common used in structured data. And the term markup refers to the use of text that brackets words or phrases in a document. They are always applied within a hierarchical, that's how we saw the shape they take, structure, and always embedded within the text stream itself. To put it simply, it's what you see at the end, the brackets. So if you're going to work with text encoding, your life is going to be angle brackets. Open an angle bracket, close an angle bracket, that's it. Your whole day you'll be spending doing this. Okay, I'm going to show two interesting projects. One, which we were lucky enough to have him here at AUC to come and present a workshop. It's by Will Hanley, who's a professor of history at the Florida State University. He's been engaging his students in text encoding in the Egyptian Gazette, which was a newspaper in Egypt, published at the beginning of the 20th century. It's very interesting. I advise you go to his website, see the instructions he's putting, the tools that he's using, what his students has come up with. It's very interesting what he came up with. Like results about the crimes, what were the crimes back then? For example, the economy, what was Egypt exporting? So it's very interesting topics. Now, that's a project that we're working on now at AUC. We're lucky to have this manuscript from the French expedition. What we're doing basically is, again, that's the image. We have text encoding. First step is to transcribe the manuscript. So we try to preserve it as much as possible, the text, what is there in the margin, what comes at the footnote. So that's the first phase we go through. Then the second phase is we use the Oxygen XML editor. So that's a tool that helps you do the text encoding. So very quickly I'll show you some examples of what we're doing. Okay, so let's suppose this is one part of the text. So it's talking about 4 battles. So this battle is called the Battle of Abu Qir. So what we're doing basically is, okay, we've transcribed the text, but as we said before, we have to explain everything to the computer. So I have to tell him that, okay, be careful, Abu Qir, that's a place name in Egypt. So I tell him that's a name. So what type of name? That's a place. So he has to be careful with that. And then another thing, for example, we have Egypt in the second line. So I have to tell him, okay, be careful, that's a name. What type? It's a place. Of course, I can use place or country. So you learn, as you move ahead, because there are different options. I've been working with this on Mark. We've been both working on that together. And we're learning as we go ahead. And for example, we've been using TEI Lite, which is like a limited option tool of TEI and XML. But I think we're going to have to use something else different. I'm going to show you this book very quickly. It's very useful. It's called Using Digital Humanities in the Classroom. I really advise you to, if you don't have it, just get it. It's very important. And it's been very useful for this presentation. I end by this word, which they say that trying new DH technologies in the classroom requires adaptability, creativity, and openness, but even more importantly, the ability for us as instructors to value unforeseen, accidental, and contingent. Anyway, I don't want to take any more time. I know people have already passed my time, so thank you so much. And if you have any
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this panel. I want to jump right in. So in my talk this afternoon, I have 2 goals. One, I want to present the text-based digital humanities exercise that we've been implementing in our general education research writing course. This might be a course that a lot of our institutions share. The exercise builds on the information literacy goals for the course and uses computational text analysis as a way to engage with the text, but really with the intellectual processes of research and research writing for the students. My second goal is a bit broader and also way shorter, but it's where I want to quickly begin. I want to highlight the generative and creative possibilities of DH in local contexts. A stubborn formulation of digital humanities is that it should be large scale and product oriented. This model of digital humanities has really significant value. As you see, we use one of the tools. I'm going to say a bit more about Voyant. But institutional pressures, grant structures can often overprivilege this formulation by demanding concrete deliverables and favoring products over pedagogy and the large scale over the local. So as the perennial tension over how to define DH, and I'm not going to get into it, but the debates around how to define it, DH is really best understood in context, in local context of individual practitioners and their practice, and in context of institutional structures and resources. So I'm going to skip through those to get to this one, which is a little more of what I'm talking about. This comes from a great site, whatisdigitalhumanities.com. Every time you push refresh, you get a new, totally different definition. So it plays with this idea of like, we don't know, it's a big umbrella. But these local contexts, so focusing on this definition, shape what DH looks like, what it does, and how we do it. So this, to me, is what critical engagement with DH is, and I mean critical engagement in the classroom, too. DH in context. It privileges the needs of local communities, of students, of faculty, of developers. It's reflective, it's responsive, and it's flexible. It privileges the humans in DH. And I think as practitioners, or as possible practitioners, it's essential that we identify these contexts quite practically to understand how they might shape the scope, design, and implementation of DH initiatives. So zooming into my institution, so we're going to work down into the class here. American University of Sharjah in the UAE. Here are some of the key contexts from professional, pedagogical, and structural perspectives that affect me. I'm not going to go over all of them, and they're neither positive nor negative. They're contextual, right? But this is the kind of context mapping that's really materially important to planning or collaborating on a new project, and really highlighting this sort of thinking before you get started, I think, is important. So I want to focus a bit more then on the course that we wanted to improve and why. English 204, right? It's a common research writing course that all of our students take, usually in the second year. It uses a standardized common syllabus, and it focuses on a process-based multiple drafts, we'll get to that in a second, multiple drafts approach to writing an academic research paper on a topic of the student's choice. So 22 students, we got 22 different topics happening. In the course, we teach research strategies, how a library is organized, what databases are, how do you find things in databases, critical reading. But we also teach argumentative research writing. How do you incorporate sources into your writing? What are citation practices, et cetera? One of the most persistent challenges of the course early in the semester is helping students see the broader contours and conversations that are happening in their research topic. So for instance, what are the different debates surrounding globalization in India? We have students that are writing on that. They often think about the topic initially, as you probably know, right, too broadly or simply. Is globalization good or bad? Right, and where do they go from there? But the ability to map out a topic effectively has implications for how they can focus their topics, how they organize their research and search for sources, and how they organize their papers. So it's critically important. And since our students are all doing their own topics, with 22 different topics, it's really difficult to address this as a group in class. So in cooperation with one of our librarians, Rhonda Stricklet, who serves as the liaison to the 204 course, and she's the point person for information literacy initiatives, as well as two fellow colleagues in the English department, Maya Agassi and Kathleen Hewitt-Smith, we began investigating how computational text analysis might offer students new ways to see or to map out their developing research topics. This project, and connected with information literacy, this project was, I want to say too, originally supported by an AMICAL grant to the Digital Humanities Summer Institute in Victoria last summer for training for all of us, and luckily I was able to attend. So put very simply, and Abdelaziz gave a really great overview already, computational text analysis is the use of counting tools to analyze texts, most often large corpora, though that's not what we're doing. It's also called distant reading, as we heard, and it can do all of these things really well. But our students don't have any experience in this, and we are not interested in teaching them text analysis per se. We're using it to help them on their way with their research goals and their writing goals. So we're using it slightly differently, right, than what it was planned for. We designed a multi-day exercise surveying your sources using computational text analysis to map your topic. We're still working on the sexy title part, but right now that's where we are. So students perform basic text analysis on a corpus, their corpus or collection of research sources. At this point, we're about 5 weeks into the semester. They've selected a research topic and started to explore it broadly, and they're working to identify a narrow research question. Some have done this successfully. Most of them are struggling at this stage. So the key part of the exercise that we emphasize is for students to think critically and reflexively about their own place in the process and to think about what would be most useful for them out of this exercise. Is it to develop new search terms? Is it to understand connections or patterns in their research topic? Is it to begin thinking about subtopics and the way they might organize their own research paper? So our goals are both these first two broader research practices, the first 2 points, and outcomes for the text analysis exercise, which is the focus of those last 2 points. And I want to emphasize here, again, that the text analysis is not meant to be objective or even quote-unquote correct. Right, this isn't something that I would take to a DH conference and be like, look what we found. Because we're working with a small corpus, students have, it's their own research, and so it's more reflective of their own research practices, what they put into this analysis, but that's exactly why it's valuable. It's meant to be exploratory and creative as a heuristic, right? It's an experimental strategy to help them reflect on their topics and their process. It doesn't require any knowledge from them, any technical knowledge. It does require computers and an internet access. So on the first day, we go over an exercise sheet. What is computational analysis? Why are we doing this, right? What is it useful to you? And how will we be doing this? And at the end, I'm going to give you my email. If you want copies of this exercise, I am more than happy to distribute them or put them in a Google folder for you, because I'm going to run quickly here. Let's stay, actually, let me stay here for a second. We briefly explain text analysis, and we help them understand the concept by putting it in the context of what they already know. So for instance, the Google and Google Scholar results that they get from keyword searches are a product of computational text analysis, which ranks which sources are most relevant to their keywords. Likewise, and probably even more relevant to them, the predictive texting capabilities on their phones, how text messaging tries to predict your next word is a result of computational text analysis. So trying to put it in the context of what they might already know. After introducing the concept of what we're doing and why, we introduce them to the how, that last question, and to the tool that we're going to be using, Voyant. So Voyant, we heard briefly already, it's an open source web-based application for analysis that offers, in their language, a suite of data visualization tools geared towards unpacking various relationships, frequencies, and occurrences of digital text in a particular corpus. So after uploading the corpus, and this is just digital files, so the PDFs that they're downloading from databases, they put them in a folder and they upload that folder. And I'm not going to go over the technical details. I'm happy to talk to anyone about it later. But after uploading the corpus, the application has an array of visualizations that show up in different panels. Each is counting the aspects of the corpus in different ways. And it's overwhelming for students, right? And for us, what is all of this trying to tell us? So we focus the students on 2 or 3 tools that are most relevant to them. For this research exercise, it's the Cirrus tool, which, as we heard, is a word cloud based on frequency. The larger words are used most often. Links, which is a visualization of network terms based on collocation, based on what they appear near. And this middle one called Termsbury, which combines frequency and collocation. So we take them through these, and we tell them that this is visualizing their texts in all sorts of different ways, and it remains their responsibility to interpret and make meanings from the results. So we first use a sample corpus together. That's what we do the first day on plastic waste, so that we can gain familiarity with the Voyant platform and the questions and observations that we can make about the data. We ask them critical questions about words they might exclude. Why would you take that word out of counting? Why don't we need to know about it? Or why they might want to look at the most frequently used words. What can they get from that? Or how about the unique terms? What would they get by just looking at unique terms? So we're trying to engage them in sort of critically thinking about what they're seeing and why they're seeing it. On the second day, students bring their own corpus, which requires them to collect at least 10 scholarly sources on their topic, and they work through these same steps to visualize and engage with it. We give them an exercise worksheet with different questions to help stimulate observation, and guide their analysis, and to give a place for them to record their visualizations and reflections. Again, because they're working individually, they're working also individually in the computer lab on this. So we've piloted this exercise in 3 class sections so far, and we've been collecting student reflections. I want to show you a few of them. The first are from this exercise, so out of these boxes where they were writing their reflections. And you don't need to read all of it. I've highlighted sort of the key things in red. This student's question is up there in italics, and she focused in, and that's her visualization as well, she focused in on the most used words and the different subtopics that she found by looking at this visualization. This student, her research question is relevant to us here, and she focused in on the keywords that she saw, and they weren't a surprise to her. She said, oh, this makes sense to me. But then she also looked at thinking about subtopics, and at the end that she wanted to see more about politics, for instance, and that she wants to search more specifically for that. So she was looking into what she didn't see as well. This last one, this was the most useful tool. And others, as they do, would say, this tool was not helpful to me at all, which I think is valuable because then we can talk about why it wasn't helpful. And visualizing interconnectivity was also, so getting them to evaluate the tools as well that they're seeing. And so that was during the exercise itself. Those are some of the things that they were writing. And then at the end of the semester, we do, like everyone does, a reflection, and we ask, what were the most impactful activities during the whole semester? So during the whole semester, it's usually the things that we've done in the last few weeks. But some of the students went back to the Voyant text analysis and highlighted this for various reasons as one of the most impactful activities that they did for different reasons, but it helps them to think about their topic in new ways. And last, I just want to finish with some reflections from us as instructors and what we might do with this next. And again, thinking about digital humanities in local contexts. One of the things is to think about the balance between asking them questions, what are you seeing, and giving them direction, but not over-directing them, so that we don't want them to answer our questions. We want them to see sort of creatively what they're looking at. Expanding on thinking critically about text analysis as an interpretive tool, and for us specifically, the challenge of integrating this in an inflexible, standardized course. So we have a common syllabus. I can carve 2 days out of that to do this, but it would be great if we had, ideally, a 3rd day for more discussion. And that gets increasingly difficult in a standardized syllabus. But one of the things we want to preserve is this process-based approach, which is true to the research paper as well. We're going to be expanding it by using Voyant with students' own drafts, so putting their own developing drafts into Voyant to think about how sentences are structured and organized, the most used words. So we want to see what happens with that later on in the semester. And the third bullet point here, one of the things we're thinking about is rolling this into a library workshop instead of an in-class. I'm a literature professor, right? I'm one of 12 plus people that teach this course. I can't expect all of the faculty to learn a little bit about Voyant or to want to do this or any of that. But if we roll it into a library workshop that students go to, then we can sort of centralize this and make it a common experience for students across the course. Let's see. And that's it. Thank you. I just want to highlight last thing that our thinking about DH and developing DH at AUS is entirely based in the curriculum right now, right? How can DH help us reach our course goals that we have, and then how can we use them to enrich and expand those goals? Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you, AMICAL and AUC, for hosting this symposium. I'm Amani Shimi from Rhetoric and Composition and core curriculum, and Wafaya Hamouda, who works in Islamic Studies. And we came together with our principal investigator for this project. I mean, it didn't start off this way. It evolved into this project, Dr. Muhammad Sarag from Arab and Islamic Civilization. Okay, so we're experimenting with digital humanities in an Islamic law class, okay? And I'm going to tell you the story of how this happened. So yeah, Islamic law in this university and in many other universities, I'm sure, is a very traditional kind of class. It's where the instructor stands up at the top of the class and gives lectures. Students take notes. It's very theoretical. It's about principles of law. It's about the different schools of thought, the different schools of jurisprudence. There's a lot of memorizing of what these theories are, and then some application in an end of semester exam or essay exam. Okay, so it's a very traditional kind of class. I teach here in Rhetoric and Composition, but I had enrolled in that class as an auditor, okay? And I was struck by how theoretical it is. I teach Rhetoric and Composition, and we're very much like Kristen, with a lot of hands-on learning, a lot of engaged learning, active learning, and this was like, oh my, I'm not doing well as a student in this class. Okay, so we had a conversation at one point, and I shared my experience with the professor, and I said, you know, the part that really engages in this class is when you bring in court cases. When we look at a court case, and you know, it's interesting because it's real and it's what happened, and an analysis of that would yield, we can extract from that, well, what are the legal principles? What are the theories of law? And it was like it clicked. This is how we're going to turn this class into an active kind of learning class. We weren't thinking digital humanities at all, okay? It was just, let's make this class more engaging, okay? So we started thinking, I mean, I come from Rhetoric and Composition, so here's the rhetorical situation triangle. We're thinking, okay, so there's this content, and it's dense academic content, but we have students who are young, who want to engage practically, who want to, you know, learn in hands-on ways, and we have the channel or the medium, okay, that they are most comfortable with. How do we bring all of this together to change the nature of the teaching of Islamic law in the classroom? Okay, so when we started thinking of the audience and who the students are and where they're coming from, and this is where we decided that, you know, we're going to flip the class and make it case-based. This was the initial plan, okay? It's going to be an inductive approach rather than go top-down. We'll go from the cases up to the principles. And we put together a grant proposal, a research grant proposal, to develop like a new kind of textbook, one that works from the cases upwards. And we would, our initial plan was that we would have like 64 cases. So 4 different types of law: criminal law, commercial law, civil law, family law. And within each law type or law category, we would focus on 4 different themes, okay? And within each theme, we'd focus on 4 different eras. So if we're looking at manslaughter, we'd get a case from the early Islamic period, a case from the Mamluk period, a case from the Abbasid or Ottoman period, and a case from modern times, all looking at manslaughter, okay, under this one theme of criminal law. So we'd have a textbook which is bilingual so that, you know, we can transfer it to other institutions and they'll be able to use it, with 64 cases. As we started working and digitizing those cases to be able to work with them and translate them and send them to research assistants, suddenly we developed like over 3,000, thanks to Wafaya, who's been doing incredible work here, over 3,000 cases. I mean, this is when I developed this PowerPoint. This morning, she told me I have 5,000 more, okay? Because people are giving her their corpora. So somebody from Saudi Arabia who has court cases from Saudi Arabia just gave her a file of 5,000 digitized court cases from Saudi Arabia across different eras. So we didn't, that's not where we started, you know. We just, I'm thinking of Jack, you know. You throw in the bean, and then there's this giant beanstalk that comes at you, and you're trying, you know, you want to get that golden egg, but you have to flee the giant because it's going to grind your bones or something. So this is where we are. We're trying to navigate this horrendous giant. At the beginning. And suddenly it just evolved into, no, it's not just a searchable database. Students can actually use it in the classroom as a research tool. And then we came across this term, digital humanities. Okay? So, yeah, I mean, it just came to us. It grew into our research unknowing, we didn't know at all. It became digital humanities, and we didn't know that that's what we were doing. I came across this intriguing quote, and I'm noticing that I have the same kind of approach to giving presentations as Abdelaziz. Okay, so here is a quote that comes from the John Barth novel in, I think it was 1960, specifically about the role of the computer and how dumb it is. So yeah, the computer is limited, but amazing at the same time. And what happened with our approach to, hey, suddenly, okay? What happened with our approach to the class, to the teaching of Islamic law, is that we recognized that we can approach the cases as we had initially planned, through qualitative, discourse-based, case-specific approaches, but using computational methods allowed us also to focus on quantitative ways of looking at them. So these would yield very different insights, okay? We can look at the corpus through lexical level words, we're not just looking at the case as a whole, but you take a lexical item and look for its development, its evolution across eras, etc. And I'm going to share with you the next slide, which generates some new types of questions. So the traditional way of looking at a corpus of cases, which we had envisioned, would be you search for a case, you take a look at it, you analyze it, and then now we're looking at a corpus level of cases, and we're seeing things across different variables, across era, across country of origin, etc. Okay, so these are some of the tagging variables that we can play with. You know, we're not at a very advanced stage like Kristen's. She's tried it out in class. We have not. We're just imagining what it would be once we tag and complete this particular corpus. So these different types of tags or titles that we give to different elements in the corpus would allow us to make like cross-variable analyses when we use the corpus. So country of origin, era, type of law, is it commercial, is it criminal, is it civil, a type of crime within the type of law. So are we looking at manslaughter, are we looking at theft, okay, are we looking at murder, whatever it is, okay, and the type of sanction, okay, how was it punished, who the judge is, who the disputing parties are, okay, so just tag, is this I mean, these terms didn't come up in the corpus yet. We're finding, in fact, that there wasn't a hierarchy of people who went to court, that I'm the accuser, the plaintiff, and you're the defendant. We're just two disputing parties of parallel status. Gender, if we tag by gender, it would allow gender-based research questions, comparative. Okay, what happened when the accuser was female? Okay, did she get the same kind of attention? Did she get, what kind of verdicts came up? And of course, the source of the document and the title, okay? So some of the research questions that are possible with this kind of pedagogy in the class completely changes the teaching of Islamic law, Islamic legal education. The students will be allowed to ask questions such as these. What types of cases were prominent in a particular era? That's not a conversation we had in the traditional class at all. We were just looking at theories and applications, but what types of cases were prominent in a particular era? What types of sanctions were or are given for a particular crime? Did the sanctions change over time? What did change? What was persistent? Okay? How has a certain term or a concept evolved over time? So again, I mean, in the next slides, I'm showing that we actually experimented with Voyant, and we put a sample, a large sample of the corpus into that in Arabic. Okay, so we're learning not just the use of the tools, but the use of the tools in Arabic, okay? And some of the words that came up are very frequent ones, like al-hukm, the verdict. If I look at that term, using these tools, and I'm not going to explain again what the tools do, but you can see when was the term most frequent across era, across type of crime. You can search for a particular word and look at the semantic field, what terms are related to that word, what terms collocate with it, or what terms are synonymous to it, and look at that. Did the term change meaning over time? And did it affect, therefore, the verdict? If people are understanding the terms in different ways, because across time there's been an evolution, is it affecting the way the court views certain crimes? So I'll go back for a minute to the new research questions that are evolving, okay? So have they evolved over time? How has the change in meaning affected the verdict or the sanction? What differences were there, if any, across similar cases specific to women and men? What was the pattern of judgment for a particular judge? Okay, so these are not questions that ever came into conversation in the traditional class. Okay, yes, we were doing comparisons across schools of jurisprudence. We were looking at the development of theory of law, but none of these research questions. So yeah, I was experimenting with Voyant, and then this is similar to Kristen's page, her slide on Voyant for her a particular activity, but this is in Arabic. You can do it in Arabic with Voyant or Voyant or whatever, however you pronounce it. Okay, so you can look at collocations of words, you can compare across subcorpora, okay? We experimented with different types of what is called a concordancer, a tool that shows you where the word occurs in context in a sentence, what words come before, what words come after, okay? So what is the linguistic context of it? And then when you click on it, you get the full text. So you're able to use mixed methods. You're able to use both qualitative, in-depth analysis of a particular case, but you're also able to employ these quantitative methods over a very large-sized corpus. And you come up with different insights that together give you a much fuller picture of the development of law. So one concordancer was Wordsmith that we looked at. You can use this in both English and Arabic, but another one that is very specific to Arabic was called Khawas. and it does the same kinds of functions. And this is developed by King Abdulaziz University in Saudi Arabia. Okay, Arabic corpus is not a concordance, sir. It's not, maybe it is. Okay, we better not say that. Okay, but it's a tool that you cannot create a corpus on that. It already has embedded corpora that you can research, but we thought, you know what? If we partner with them, if we send them an email, it's developed by Brigham Young University, and we partner with them, we can integrate our corpus within their tool, and then it would be available for everybody who uses it. These are some ideas that we are playing with. And these are multiple tools that we found online and we have not experimented with yet, but they all look at Arabic text. So I think what we're concluding and what we're clearly seeing is integration of digital humanities in a very theoretical class, such as Islamic law, okay? So whatever type of class you're teaching, however theoretical and hardcore it is, by integrating digital humanities tools in the class, okay, you change the role of the student. They become engaged researchers. They become creators of knowledge rather than just recipients and people who apply knowledge. No, they're critics. They are creators of knowledge. The tool is expandable, and you can share it with not just your own institution, but multiple institutions. And if people in universities in Saudi Arabia and people in universities in the Emirates and Turkey and whatever, they add to this corpus, bringing in their whole corpus, as much as possible, of court cases to this tool that we are developing, then it's going to be an incredible, incredible teaching resource, and it would change Islamic education. Can I just ask if Wafea would like to give any examples or would like to add something? Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wafea, and I work in the Arabic Studies, Arabic and Islamic Studies Department. I'm the project coordinator, and I'm giving you a brief sample of how this worked. For instance, if we are dealing with manslaughter, in the Mamluk era, it would be the word corpse, which means gifa. And then the Ottoman area would mean the dead body of somebody. This kind of word, the different uses of word, helped the judge in each era to recognize how the status of the corpse was found and how the person. Added to this, if it would say al-maghdur, okay, and how this would affect the sanction and the sentence. This was just a quick thing to wrap it up. If you need to ask me more questions, I'll be available around. Thanks, everyone.